Premier Scott Moe for an announcement that builds on the MOUs that Premier Ford and I signed a few weeks ago at the Calgary Stampede. Today marks an important step forward in uniting our country as Saskatchewan jumps on board with Alberta and Ontario to pursue our shared goals of economic growth, opportunity and prosperity. Today, we're signing a Memorandum of Understanding that makes Saskatchewan an official signatory and partner as we work together on building oil and gas pipelines and expanding trade corridors to global markets. This agreement will see our three provinces advance pipelines and pathways to boost exports of homegrown energy, potash, critical minerals and agricultural products to markets across Canada and across the world. And when it comes to advancing these goals, it's undeniable that there is strength in numbers. Together, we're taking an unprecedented step to further unify our efforts to get shovels in the ground on major projects across industries with one ultimate outcome in mind: connecting our world-class resources and value-added products to Canada's growing list of customers. Our three provinces will also continue our joint calls for the removal of federal barriers to nation-building projects so we can collectively advance pipelines, rails, transmission infrastructure, and other major projects. We know there's strength in taking a united front, but we cannot achieve our shared provincial goals without cooperation from the federal government. Alberta knows this. Saskatchewan knows this, Ontario knows this, and it's time for the federal government to acknowledge it as well. And if Prime Minister Mark Carney doesn't want to work with us, it's not just myself and Scott Moe he'll have to worry about. He'll also have to contend with Premier Doug Ford, who has said many times he'll be all over him like an 800-pound gorilla. So it's time to get rid of the bad laws that have harmed Canada's ability to grow the energy sector and other industries such as mining and manufacturing. By now, you should all know these bad laws that I speak of quite well. Bill C-69, the oil and gas emissions cap, the tanker ban, the net zero vehicle, and net zero electricity mandates. Removing these anti-resource, anti-development laws will allow Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario to attract the investment and project partners we need to get shovels in the ground, grow industries, and create jobs. So I'm excited to continue collaborating so that we can reach our shared goals, including to advance pipelines and responsible energy development. This new way of working together across provincial borders will benefit the people of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario, and ultimately all people across Canada. And I'm hopeful that today's momentum continues to build and leads to even more provinces and territories joining us. Thank you, and I'll hand it over to Premier Scott Moe.
I would just say thank you to Danielle, and I could really just say ditto and sit down, and that might be, is about as strong a statement as I could make. But also thank you to Premier Ford for hosting us here in Ontario as we find our way through our Council of Federation meeting this year. I think an important year for the Council of Federation to come together along with Prime Minister Carney later today. And I'm pleased to join in signing this Memorandum of Understanding. For far too long, as Premier Smith has said, Canada's energy, our critical mineral sector, whether it be our oil and gas sector, all of our exporting industries have faced far too many bottlenecks in not only their production, but in limiting our ability to provide those products to nations around the world. And it is us coming together as provinces, and we would very much hope to work alongside the Prime Minister Carney and his government in changing that, in enhancing Canada's opportunity to not only become the strongest economy in the G7, but ensuring that we can achieve the aspirational goals that Prime Minister Carney has put forward of becoming a global energy superpower. In order to do that, we are going to have to make changes in the development of policies that we have in Canada, and Premier Smith had named a number of them. Why does this matter to a province of Saskatchewan, and why does this agreement, building on many other agreements, whether they be on free and fair interprovincial trade or whether they be on accessing all ports that we have available to us in Canada, why is this important? It's important in Saskatchewan because we do produce a number of products, potash, oil and gas, agricultural products, of course, uranium, but also now moving into additional copper, helium, lithium, rare earth elements, and many other products as well that are going to need access to even more countries around the world, more export options so that we can find, these products can find their way to those countries around the world so that we can be part of their food security, part of their energy security. Yes, Canada can be part of global manufacturing security and ultimately providing Canadians with economic security, which is the goal most certainly, and has been the goal of our government for some period of time. And so any and all options when it comes to how do we provide the world with these opportunities are very much supported by our province in Saskatchewan. And I thank both Premier Smith of Alberta and Premier Ford of Ontario for moving yet another positive step and a positive initiative forward in us finding a way not only to produce more of the products that are providing that energy, food, and manufacturing security for Canadians, for North Americans, and for other global countries, but for finding additional ways for us to provide that global energy, food, and manufacturing security to the world. Thank you both, and I'm pleased to sign this supportive document today.
Well, good morning, everyone, and such a pleasure to be joined by my good friends, Premier Scott Moe and Premier Danielle Smith. This is an amazing day for our province and for our entire country, because when Ontario, Alberta, Saskatchewan come together, we're not just signing a piece of paper, we're sending a clear message. Canada is ready to build. And we're going to get it done as one. Team Canada. For too long, we've seen projects after project get tied up in red tape, regulation, delayed, blocked, and then canceled. But today, the world needs what Canada has. It's time to think big. It's time to bring our critical minerals, our oil, our natural gas and energy to new markets across the globe. It started earlier this month when I visited Premier Smith during the Calgary Stampede, and what a great host Premier Smith was, and boy, you had quite the party. Is the party still going on? We signed an agreement to work hand in hand to build new energy and trade infrastructure, and today Saskatchewan is stepping up. Premier Moe has offered his full support, and that's a game changer. Let me tell you our plan. This new agreement will help move Western oil and gas to new and existing refineries in southern Ontario and to northern tidewater with deep sea port in James Bay. It will connect Ontario's critical minerals in the Ring of Fire region to new ports in Western Canada, helping to build a true end-to-end critical mineral supply chain. All of it will be built using great Ontario-made and Saskatchewan-made steel, creating jobs, attracting investment, and unlocking the full potential of our economy. And all of it will be done in partnership with Indigenous communities. Canada's premiers are stepping up. Now, we need the federal government to do its part. We need the federal government to fix its broken regulatory environment and streamline approvals. And I agree 100% without listing them all. We're all in agreement what Premier Smith said. If we don't get rid of these regulations, things won't fly. But we need to do that, and hopefully we'll convince the Prime Minister to do the same thing. There's no more time to waste. We're focused on a future for all Canadians, where we stand united, take control of our own destiny, and build prosperity, the likes of which we've never seen before. I want to thank both premiers for coming here to Huntsville and signing this agreement, and may God bless the people of Canada. Thank you.
Guys?
Thank you.
Should we stand up and,
Yeah, you'll now start taking questions from the media. As a friendly reminder, the format today will be one question. Please state your name and your outlet before your question. You can move up to the podium. Yes. Yes.
Oh, no, I'm standing in your spot. You can go to the mic.
Premiers, Peter Zimonjic from CBC News. This is a question for all of you. You've spoken a lot about using, getting our resources to other markets, but as Danielle Smith pointed out, our oil currently runs through the United States to Ontario. Michigan threatened to cut that off a couple of years ago. Trump could cut it off for political reasons. Do we need to build a pipeline from Alberta to Ontario on Canadian soil, regardless of whether there's a proponent or not for national security reasons?
Well, I believe so. My good friend, the governor of Michigan, and she's known her from day one, constantly threatens to cut off Line 5. That would basically shut down our airport, shut down a big part of Ontario, and we can't chance it any longer. We need to be independent. We need a pipeline going to southwestern Ontario to one of the refineries and be self-reliant. We can't rely on the Americans anymore. As simple as that. I love the Americans, by the way. I love the people. Love the elected officials, except one. And that's it. So yes, we have to start diversifying our trade around the globe. And as Premier Smith and Premier Moe said, we have to be leaders in the G7 when it comes to our economy. And we need to unleash every tool in our Canadian toolbox and tell the world that Canada is open for business. We need to cut the red tape, regulations, and regulatory burden that we're facing. And I'm confident, working with the federal government and the Prime Minister, we'll do exactly that. I'll pass it over to the other premiers.
I would just say very quickly, there's really two conversations there, and you've hit at the continental or Canadian energy security one is the second one. First is as an oil producing region, and providing oil at the highest price possible. The number one priority economically is for us in Western Canada to have access to the Northwest Coast. That will shrink the differential. That will provide additional egress capacity into the U.S. Some of that does come, yes, back up into Canada. But to the oil industry, from an economic perspective, that is the priority. As a Canadian, and as ensuring and valuing and wanting and desiring us to have Canadian energy security and to, yes, be part of a North American energy security plan. But as a Canadian and valuing our Canadian energy security, we certainly need to have Canadian access through a line to the refineries in Eastern Canada, and I think that would be important to those that live in Central and Eastern Canada as well, so that we have that energy security as a country. And I would just point out, and Premier Smith will have much more to say on this, as the largest oil-producing province in Canada by a great margin. I would point out the comparison of what happened most recently in Eastern Europe, when European countries learned that they have been entirely reliant for a significant amount of their energy security on Russia. Not a country that today they want to be reliant on for that energy security, and are looking to other options around the world, including uranium from Saskatchewan and nuclear reactors from North America. We shouldn't allow that to happen to us as Canadians, to be reliant on another country, whether it be for the production of our energy or whether it be for accessing that energy through rail lines, pipelines, nor should we in any way be reliant on foreign ports for us to provide that energy security and that opportunity to the world as well. So yes, I think as Canadians, we most certainly need to have a very mature discussion about how we can provide Western Canadian oil and gas to Canadians that live in Central and Eastern Canada for our own good, looking forward generations, and for our own not only economic security, but ultimately our general security and our energy security moving forward.
I've said that I'm supportive of pipelines northeast and west. I'd like to see all of them built. To Scott's point, clearly if we're opening up new markets, our best opportunity is to build a pipeline to the northwest BC coast in order to access the Asian markets. But it should give us pause that we in Eastern Canada are overly reliant on oil that either has to come by way of the United States or has to be shipped in from overseas. And so we could have addressed that years ago with the Energy East pipeline. Energy East is now no longer an option that's available to us because those pipelines are now full of gas. But if we can begin by creating a pipeline option that will at least help us to get to Ontario so that we can satisfy the needs of this market, I think that that'll give energy security to the country. And that's probably something that's long overdue. We probably should have done it decades ago. But we didn't do it decades ago, but now we can do it now. And I hope we'll be able to do that.
Good morning, Premiers. Kate McKenna from CBC. This too is for all of you. I'm wondering what you heard from Mark Carney last night and what you hope to hear from him today.
What I've heard consistently from Mark Carney is that he wants Canada to have energy dominance and be an energy superpower, and that he wants us to diversify our markets, starting with doing more trade with each other. That's what the MOU is about today, is how can we find a way to support each other, and then in addition to that, find a way to get to new markets. That's the only way I think that Canada will be able to have the security, the energy security we're looking for. And it's not just energy. Once we have those routes that are established and we can build out rail line and port infrastructure, that's great for food export, for fiber export, for manufactured goods export. So those are the things that I think that the provinces are taking the leadership on, and everything I've heard from Mark Carney seems to suggest he's supportive of that. He would demonstrate his great support if he would repeal or substantially revise the 9 bad laws that are impacting our investment climate. He hasn't done that yet, but as I've said, we're giving him some time to get into the role. He's got a new legislative session starting up in September, and we'll have a better idea of what kind of revisions he's going to make then.
Well, I know Prime Minister Carney, he wants to be one of the strongest economies in the G7, which we're confident we can do. But as Premier Smith said, we have to get rid of the regulatory burdens. That's what's holding us back. And when we do that, we can unleash the economic powerhouse Canada truly is, diversify our trade, build pipelines west, east, south, north, and get critical minerals out of the ground, not in 15 years, but within two years, get permitting happening a lot quicker. That's what's going to make sure that we're an economic powerhouse, build large infrastructure projects across the country as well. But we'll have a further discussion with Prime Minister Carney today, and we'll get into it a little deeper at the table.
And I would just focus in on 3 points with the Prime Minister, of which I think he is, off to a good start with respect to. First is the regulatory process that both Premier Smith and Premier Ford have mentioned is flawed in Canada. And I think that is recognized by most members at the federal level as they've passed C5, which is essentially a piece of legislation that is there to circumvent a lot of the timeframes that are involved and the uncertainty that are involved in the current regulatory process that we have. And it's important for us to work alongside the federal government and its provinces to actually correct the root of the problem, which is the multi-layered, 9 bad laws, as Premier Smith has mentioned, but many others. Those are the 9 priority pieces of legislation and regulation that need to be changed. Second is what we're discussing here today, is how do we increase port access and access to the world for Canadian products, and we're supportive of any and all additional port capacity that we can find and work together on expediting in Canada. And then last but not least is market access. And in a world where, there's much talk about tariffs and much talk about counter tariffs, not just with the U.S., but with other countries. China is one of note for Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Ontario products as well in the agricultural sphere. Prime Minister Carney has been, I think, as engaging as we could hope. Certainly is engaging with the President, I would say, to a higher level than what we saw a number of months ago. And also with conversations that I've had with Prime Minister Carney with respect to some of the counter tariffs from China as a result of us as Canadians aligning with U.S. trade policy when it comes to approaching China. There is a price to pay for that, and all too often that lands on Saskatchewan and Canadian agricultural products. But Prime Minister Carney has been very engaging in reaching out and starting that conversation with China on how do we move forward, not only when it comes to canola tariffs and pulse tariffs, pork tariffs, and seafood tariffs, but more broadly. in our trade conversation with a country like China. And if we are going to, in any way, as we produce more and make it available to the world, diversify in any way that additional production away from the U.S., we are going to have to deal with growing markets like China, like India, and other markets around the world.
Hi, Mickey here with Politico. This question is for Smith and Ford. I was speaking with John Catsimatidis regarding the ostrich situation in BC. He had a meeting yesterday with RFK Jr. and Dr. Oz on this matter. He essentially wants the PM to intervene in the case, and he said that he's spoken to both of you on this issue as well. Will you be applying pressure to the PM on this? And do either of you have any issues or any concerns about the federal government's treatment of farmers, particularly in this case?
Well, I have asked my agriculture minister to look into it to see if we had a similar situation in Alberta, what would we be able to do differently? And one of the things that I think is worth looking at is when avian flu went through that herd, it did kill 20% of them, but it didn't kill 80% of them. So maybe there is something to learn from whether there's an immunity or some kind of vaccine that could be developed as a result of having that flock survive. I think that maybe we have to think about different ways to do animal husbandry and animal safety, and why not try a different approach? So I'm open-minded to see if there's any persuasion on that. I gather that the U.S. government is interested in partnering with BC if they wanted to do that. I'd be supportive of that because you can see that this case has really taken on a lot of public sentiment behind it. And if we can find a better way than doing mass culls in any situation like this, I think it's probably worth it to try to find a better way to do it. I don't know if you've got a thought.
Yeah, no, I've talked to John many times about these ostriches. I'm an animal lover, full disclosure, and I want to do everything I can to help him. I think he had a plan to bring him down to Florida as well, to a sanctuary down there. So anything John needs, I'm always there to support him. He's a good man. He cares for animals, and he puts his money where his mouth is, too, when it comes to making sure that he protects all animals. So, thank you.
Hi there, Michael Sarabia with CPAC. The question is actually for you, Premier Ford. And I appreciate today's announcement has to do with pipelines and energy corridors, but given that amongst the regulations being pointed out is the EV mandate, what does today's announcement, how does that affect your past enthusiasm to develop battery plants in Ontario as well as have EVs manufactured in Ontario?
Well, I always believe I'm a big proponent of the market dictates. The market will dictate, not governments will dictate. We have to get rid of these mandates that companies won't be able to meet their targets. And let's continue investing. I'm confident that eventually the EV sector per se will continue growing. But right now, the people are going to decide. But let's not slow down on building the battery plants and any other EV plants, but who knows this the best but the auto sector, and they'll determine that. But we're going to continue investing in the market itself.
Yeah. I'll just add a couple things. I think Doug produces 1.2 million cars, and Canadians buy about 1.2 million cars. So we've, as a province, taken the leadership in saying we're going to prioritize fleet vehicles that are made and finished in Ontario. And there's some great options. There's light-duty vehicles, heavy-duty vehicles, there's hybrid vehicles. And so we would hope that others would look at it in the same way, that if the Americans are going to take a hostile approach against our auto industry, I think it's up to us to be supportive. When it comes to electric vehicles, we only have a very small percentage of electric vehicles that have been purchased in Alberta. And as I mentioned, if we were to try to meet the mandate in Alberta alone, we'd have to buy all of the low emissions vehicles currently being produced in Ontario, which is impossible for the entire country to achieve, which means this policy is forcing us to look outside of supporting for Ontario in order to be able to achieve it. And I guess the last thing I'd say is that we think that we're trying to build our hydrogen economy in Alberta. We've bought The Edmonton International Airport bought 100 Toyota Mirais, which is the passenger vehicle. We're doing a dual fuel pilot with the trucking industry. CP is building hydrogen locomotives in our province. We have hydrogen for home heating, hydrogen as well that we're looking for electricity. But I would love to see the Ontario manufacturers figure out a way that we could perhaps have a hydrogen combustion engine. I know Toyota is made here, and then that may be a way for us to reach zero emissions targets a different way. I think that we have to allow the market and innovators to be able to meet the needs of each individual marketplace. And so I'm hoping we can have a really constructive conversation with Ontario about that now. I've begun it as well with individuals with Toyota who've been in our province. And so let's just have a little more latitude to allow for the market to work and innovation to work. That's what I would say, and I think we can all benefit from that.
I'd maybe speak a little bit on that. As Doug said, or Premier Ford, pardon me, said the market will drive this, and I think we're seeing that as well. And we shouldn't forget about just how integrated our economy is interprovincially, but also across North America. And this is maybe something for us to remember as we engage with the Trump administration and the current U.S. administration. But we are very, very integrated, and we're integrated for a reason, because it's the most efficient to produce things. We had a steak yesterday. That animal is likely born in Saskatchewan, finished in Alberta, and is now sold by an Ontario grocer out here. That's how integrated our Canadian economy is on every front. When it comes to manufacturing, whether they be e-vehicles, gas-powered vehicles, whatever that is, you're going to see that largely happening in Ontario from a Canadian perspective. But as we move to EVs, there is also further integration that is occurring there. There's rare earths, critical minerals that are going to come from Quebec, the Ring of Fire in Ontario, but also from Western Canada as well. We've opened a processing facility for rare earths, of which there's much interest around the world, that would ultimately, in the future, build the battery elements for just such vehicles as the market determines the outbuild of that. And so, I think often we get thoughts that, this is largely an impact only to Ontario, but we are so very integrated across our provinces, whether it's in our food production, whether it's in our energy security and what we provide to other Canadians, which was in a former question, or more generally in our economy. When one decision is made in one part of the country, it often has a ripple effect in other areas, whether we recognize it or not.
Clark Heipel from your TV Coach Go News in North Bay. My question is for Premier Doug Ford. Can you be more specific regarding, quote, regulatory burdens and, quote, bad laws that you're referring to that you want changed at the federal level?
Well, I'm going to hand it over to Danielle. She has it memorized. I don't have it memorized, so let it roll, Danielle.
Sure, happy to go through them. I've got a little cheat sheet right here in my notes so that I always have them on hand. So first of all, C-69, we call that the No More Pipeline bill. That needs to obviously have some substantial rewrite, and I think that's what the 2-year to yes policy recognizes, is that has been a barrier to getting big projects built. That's one. The emissions cap. We're not going to be able to fill a new pipeline if we're capping emissions, which means capping production. With the aggressive targets, we would have to curtail production 2 million barrels a day by 2030. That's got to go. Carbon pricing, we want that to stay provincial. We have a $95 carbon price. Other provinces have made different choices for different reasons, but we want that to be provincial. We don't want them to take over carbon pricing. The clean electricity regs, I can tell you we have 17,000 megawatts of demand for AI data centers in our province. The only way we're going to build them is if we can build natural gas power plants. That won't happen if officials or if company executives are going to go to jail in 2035 for not having met emissions reduction targets that are overly aggressive. Tanker ban, again, if you can't put something on a ship, there's no point in building a pipeline to the coast, so that's got to go. The declaration of plastics is toxic. We have an integrated market back and forth between the U.S. and Canada on plastics. If you're having to handle it like it's hazardous material, adds a bunch of additional regulation. Plus, the federal government's partnered with us on a net zero petrochemical plant in Alberta. So it's chaotic policy to support and subsidize on the one hand and then try to ban it on the other. Net zero vehicle mandate, we've discussed that. And then censorship of Bill C-59. What we're hearing, if an industry is not able to talk about their genuine emissions reductions efforts without facing criminal charges for greenwashing, then we're kind of missing the point of the exercise. And the last one is we don't want to see export taxes on energy or export restrictions for the reasons that we've been talking about as well, that the Americans have a bigger hammer. If they cut off Line 5, not only does that harm Ontario, it also harms Quebec. And so we do need to find other routes, but in the meantime, we shouldn't be talking about energy restrictions, because I think it would have a devastating impact on Alberta. So those are on Canada. Those are the 9.
What I would recommend to the federal government, and I have mentioned it, create a Ministry of Red Tape and Regulations. We did that, and we saved, through sectors coming to us about unnecessary regulations that are duplicated between the provinces and the federal government. We found over $1.1 billion of savings and over 1 million people working hours. So that's a big chunk.
Premier Ford, stay there.
Yeah. Okay.
Rob Ferguson, Toronto Star. I saw you nodding when Premier Smith was saying no export taxes. So does this mean that that electricity surtax you had briefly imposed, that idea is completely dead? And what's your new bottom line now that it appears apparent that it's going to be impossible to avoid some tariffs?
Well, everything's on the table. I like agreeing with Premier Smith. We're like-minded. All three of us are like-minded. And so when I'm nodding my head, I'm agreeing. But on the export tax on electricity, everything's on the table. And we'll see how this deal goes. And we'll see what he has to say on August the 1st. Most importantly, we have to stay united and just strengthening our trade with other countries right around the world. I think we have, 51, 57 tariff-free agreements with other countries. We've got to take advantage of that and look at other markets. So that's what we're going to do. And I also agree with Premier Moe. Let's look at other markets, big markets out there that can compete against the U.S. But again, wouldn't it be great if we can just have a fair and free trade deal with the United States and keep moving forward? I always mention we buy more, Canada buys more products off the U.S. than China, Japan, Korea, UK, and France combined. So we don't need to take a back seat to anyone, and we sure the heck don't have to take a back seat to President Trump. Thank you.
You can just stay there again, Premier.
Okay. Thank you.
Jack Cowan from the Trillium.
Hi, Jack.
Yesterday, after the meeting with the Indigenous leaders, you said you can't move forward without their collaboration and their buy-in.
Yes.
And I can't do something if they don't want to do it. Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler said he hoped we were recording those comments, and we were, because some might take that as granting First Nations veto power over projects. So I guess my question is, how much did you mean that?
I just want to work in collaboration. What we're trying to do, and they know this, that we're trying to make their lives better. We're trying to make their kids and their grandchildren's lives better. No one is treating them better. No one's ever put $3 billion in the window to say, here, let's be part of this deal. And $70 million of training, $10 million of scholarships. We're working all together. And I've known Alvin from day one. He's a good person. But I can assure you, I'm getting endless calls from chiefs from around the province saying, I want to be part of this. I want to be part of the economic zones. And those who want it, we're going to work with them. Those who don't, well, they're going to lose out. Simple as that. I can't force anyone to come to the table.
Isaac Callan, Global News. You can stay there again, Premier.
Thank you.
On Quebec, both
Yes.
on this MOU and on the interprovincial trade, is Quebec on board with what you want to do with pipelines, and what's taking so long in terms of getting François Legault to sign up to an interprovincial trade MOU with Ontario? What's the barrier?
Well, we've had the opportunity to sign 10 MOUs with the territories and all the provinces, to the exception of Quebec and Newfoundland. But I think we'll get there. Premier Legault is a very bright, business-minded person, and we'll get there. They're unique, but we'll get around to getting it done. I love them, I do, but. Yeah, that's important, but I think we'll have a chat with them, all three of us. We'll see what happens. All it does is benefit Quebecers. That's what it does. It brings jobs and opportunities to them. So it's a good thing.
This will be the last question.
Hello, Laura Stone, Globe and Mail. Premier Smith, I want to ask again about this online campaign targeting one of our reporters. You said yesterday that you don't know David Wallace, but your official X account has watched his videos before. So has anyone in your government ever used his services, and how did you come to know him?
We're in Ontario to work on some pretty important issues, like the threat of tariffs, and we met with the nurses this morning, we met with the First Nations yesterday, and we're talking with the Prime Minister about how we're going to get national projects built. I've given you a statement. I did an interview with CTV. I'd direct you to that. I have no further comment on it.
That concludes our press conference. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.